Yikes. Marjorie Taylor Greene had a full-blown MAGA meltdown and an on-camera altercation with a Social Security advocate of all people who simply asked her to protect Social Security benefits from the proposed cuts of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Not only did Greene curse at this guy and insult him, she physically snatched papers away from him and threw them down the hallway. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, as I told you, you would think that Marjorie Taylor Greene would be more at peace given that she and her party triumphed in the 2024 election. Donald Trump is returning to the White House. Republicans have retained control of the House of Representatives. Republicans are taking back control of the United States Senate. They have a 6-3 conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, according to reporting, has been elevated. Reportedly, she is going to lead a House Oversight Subcommittee. She will chair a House Oversight Subcommittee that will work closely with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy's Department of Government Efficiency. So things should be all sunshine and rainbows for Marjorie Taylor Greene. And yet, in so many ways, she seems more unhinged and monstrous than ever. And so I want you to see this exchange between Greene and a gentleman from Social Security Works. It's a Social Security advocacy group. And we're going to watch the full clip in its entirety. He's making reasonable requests, and she is dangerously unhinged in this video.
Congresswoman.
PAC, he's funded by a Democrat PAC, donates 100% to Democrats, is only here to make...
No, we're bipartisan.
Trump. No, you're not.
We
looked you up.
Yeah.
You are 100% funded by Democrats. You donate to Democrats. You're out here asking bullshit questions.
What is the bullshit question?
All of your questions. So
This is a mailing from
the Americans.
This is Donald Trump.
Trump. We all campaigned on protecting seniors' Social Security. You can't lie about it. See, yeah, this is your political agenda. You know what? We don't care.
That's Donald Trump. That's Donald Trump's mailing.
No, you are. You're not media.
That's Donald Trump's mailing.
Right here is for Democrat ads to attack Republicans.
So it's really simple. It's really simple.
No, it's
Will
not
you
simple.
pledge
No, you're a
to take
liar.
Social Security and Medicare cuts off the table?
You and this guy right here, look, you're lying.
What am I lying about?
Because
I'm
President
asking
Trump-
you
President
to
Trump
take a
campaigned-
pledge.
I don't need to take a pledge because we've already done that all year long. And guess what? The sad story for you is the American people elected Trump, his agenda, and Republicans to lead the country because you guys suck so bad.
So I'm just wondering if you want to take a pledge to not cut Social Security and Medicare. So that's obviously conservative firebrand Marjorie Taylor Greene. And she took my mailing of Donald Trump and threw it in the air. And I'll have to go get some other ones.
So,
Congress,
folks, this is the issue. Imagine, first things first. Again, we always play this game. It's probably futile, but it's worth recording. And it's worth thinking about, I think, even just for posterity. Imagine Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar or some sort of Democratic politician reacting the same way to really anybody. Let's say a right-wing troll, let's say a right-wing advocacy group. Let's say AOC is met in the hallway by a pro-life advocate, somebody who opposes abortion, and just asks questions. Will you commit to doing X, Y, and Z? Will you commit to, when you codify Roe v. Wade protections into law, leaving open the possibility of states imposing third trimester abortion limitations, whatever it may be? And AOC reacting like that. What would be the response from Fox News, Piers Morgan, OAN, Newsmax, Tim Pool, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, Steven Crowder, Jordan Peterson? What would the reaction be from CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, Reuters, the Associated Press? She would be pilloried. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, not for the first time, though perhaps not quite this bad, acts so unhinged. Unhinged, I mean, insulting, attacking, grabbing this man's papers, throwing them down the hallway, telling him that he sucks. You suck? This is also the woman who referred to every Democrat as the Democratic Party as a party of pedophiles and groomers. She said the Democrats are groomers and pedophiles. It's a party of groomers and pedophiles. It's an evil party. They're an evil party, she said. On Twitter, on Steve Bannon's War Room podcast, on 60 Minutes. Imagine if a Democrat spoke about Republicans or just a right-wing advocacy group in that way, what the reaction would be. But this is just a Tuesday for Marjorie Taylor Greene, or in this case, the time of recording, a Wednesday. Raw Story discusses this. Marjorie Taylor Greene literally threw Donald Trump's promise not to cut Social Security on the floor as she met with House Doge caucuses, the House Doge caucus, for the first time on Tuesday. Greene was heading into a meeting with the caucus that will give recommendations to Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, and she was confronted by advocate Alex Lawson, executive director of Social Security Works. We're bipartisan, Lawson explained, presenting the lawmaker with a document detailing Trump's promise not to cut Social Security. And then you, of course, saw the full exchange. Now, what's interesting about this is, given what he was asking, how anodyne it was, given that Trump apparently, if you believe Trump, which you shouldn't ever, given that he is a prolific liar, the likes of which we've not seen in modern politics, but given that they've said on paper they're not going to cut Social Security or Medicare, what's the wrong with saying, you know what, I do take a pledge. I do take a pledge to not recommend Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid cuts to the Department of Government Efficiency, and I pledge to oppose any cuts to those programs should others make the recommendation. But she can't do it. She won't do it. She's hostile to the notion. She could have even said, listen, I've pledged all of that elsewhere, and so it just gets derivative to do it again, but here's where I've made that pledge, so you have nothing to worry about. But instead, she reacts with venom and hostility and aggression. And then it makes you wonder, maybe Social Security is vulnerable. Maybe with Republicans in charge, we should be a bit concerned about Social Security cuts. I want to remind you, CNBC, which is, it's relatively wonky, relatively right-leaning when it comes to finances, this is what they had to say. Doge's Musk Ramaswamy want Congress to pass huge spending cuts. That's a tough sell. Key points. They are seeking major cuts to federal spending. Any meaningful reductions will be near impossible without legislation to cut Social Security benefits, Medicare and Medicaid, long considered a third rail in Congress, meaning if you grab it, you get electrocuted, the metaphor. The duo had a day of meetings on Capitol Hill with hundreds of Republican lawmakers. Their overall message was popular. A smaller federal government, looser regulations, and a private sector approach to the public sector have long been cornerstones of conservative governance. But there was an elephant in the room that they visited, an unspoken understanding that Musk's stated goal of slashing the federal spending by $2 trillion is already dead on arrival. The reason for this comes down to math. In fiscal year 2023, for example, the federal government spent a total of $6.1 trillion, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. Of that $6.1 trillion, about $3.8 trillion was already off limits for cuts on day one, legally obligated to go toward mandatory spending programs like Social Security benefits for retired workers, Medicare coverage, and veterans benefits. After that, roughly $650 billion was set aside to pay the interest on the national debt, also mandatory spending. This left $1.7 trillion for everything else, known as discretionary funding. $805 billion of this was spent on national defense, a largely untouchable pot of money. So even though on paper it's discretionary, defense spending in this country, Republicans are much more egregious about it, but Democrats, quite frankly, are too. It is the form of discretionary spending which is the most broadly supported by a bipartisan consensus and has been for decades. Finally, the remainder was divvied up among the federal government departments that perform much of the visible daily work of government. Agencies like FEMA. Well, we just suffered Hurricanes Helene and Milton back to back. Do we really want to cut FEMA? NASA. Now, Elon Musk might want to cut NASA and probably appropriate those funds for SpaceX, which would be hella corrupt and unethical, and thus, totally in line with MAGA. And Customs and Border Protection. Trump campaigned in part on the chaos at the southern border, which by the way, he helped foment, by sabotaging a conservative bipartisan border bill. Did you want to cut Border Patrol? While Musk and Ramaswamy went from meeting to meeting, Republicans close to government funding process, like House Appropriations Committee member Steve Womack, said that while the cuts were possible, the $2 trillion that Musk talks about would likely be a bridge too far. If you're going to leave the social safety net programs alone and not touch them, that means you're going to have to try to cut hundreds of billions of dollars out of discretionary spending. If you want to achieve massive Doge-style reductions, he told CNBC in an interview, it would be very difficult to do that without jeopardizing national security. Even proposing small cuts or changes to mandatory programs like Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid can prove politically dangerous for members of Congress who must run for re-election every few years. Nonetheless, some Republicans are open to considering limited reforms to these programs, and that's where I want to show you some clips. So, for example, this guy's going to be featured twice, as a matter of fact. Let me bring this up. Rich McCormick is somebody who, unfortunately, has been a bit of an albatross around the neck of MAGA Republicans and Republican Congress people who desperately want to avoid the perception they're going to target Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But I want to play this clip on CNN in which CNN, or its host, uses a Republican talking about cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid to kind of hit another MAGA Republican or a Republican congressperson with that.
After Obamacare was implemented, and there are opportunities for us to try to find ways to rein in that spending on the healthcare side. I also think that there is discretionary spending that we should be looking at that we can tackle, but I don't think Social Security is something that's even being discussed by House Republicans.
Well, it is by one, actually, your colleague. Let's listen to Congressman Rich McCormick.
We're going to have some hard decisions. We got to bring the Democrats in and talk about Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. There's hundreds of billions of dollars to be saved, and we know how to do it. We just have to have the stomach to actually take those challenges on.
I mean, this is something that is being discussed by people who are saying the quiet part out loud.
He actually didn't say cuts, but there are reforms that can be done to Social Security to actually shore it up. Look, the reality is, if we don't do something in the next 8 years or so, Social Security will become insolvent. So we have to do something to protect Social.
How sad is that? Listen, when he said that, there are hundreds of billions of dollars that can be saved, he didn't mean cutting. He didn't mean saving like that. He meant saving in a non-cutting way. Would you clarify what that is? Listen, that's how you know these people are full of shit. Anytime somebody tells you that they want to save X number of dollars, thousands, millions, billions from a program, they mean by definition to cut it. And you know what? That's not inherently bad. For example, if I were to say, I want to save hundreds of billions of dollars, or just tens of billions, or just billions, or just millions on the defense budget, what am I talking about? I'm talking about cutting that amount of money from the budget. Now, a lot of people, myself included, would say, I'm cool with that. We spend more than the next 14 countries combined. I don't think militarily we could probably take on all 14 countries simultaneously, like China, Russia, United Kingdom, Germany, France, like other nuclear powers. I'm not sure that we can do that. So it seems to me that we're not getting as much bang for our buck militarily. But you know what? Nothing inherently wrong with cutting a program. She recognizes, and Republicans recognize, that proposing cuts to Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid, it is the third rail. So they're hoping for some sort of linguistic ambiguity. When we say save, we don't mean cut. We're talking about a non-cut saving. What is that? Never mind. And then they try to pull a Jedi mind trick and run off so they don't have to answer the question. This, by the way, is the specific MAGA Republican Rich McCormick in a different context on C-SPAN, also pitching the idea of cutting Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security.
And this is the problem. People have to have a realistic look at how we're going to survive as a nation. We keep on cutting it. This is the most compassionate thing we can do. If we don't do something to tweak Social Security, I'm just talking about small tweaks, but we will have an automatic cut within 10 years of 21%. That's not going to be voted on. That's just going to happen. I'm trying to save Social Security from bankruptcy. Same thing with Medicare, by the way. An 11% cut will happen in about a decade if we don't do something to shore it up. And we can't just say we're just going to print more money off, because right now, if we spent that entire $4.5 trillion of income per year of revenue, we would take over 7 years to pay off the debt without any interest payments and without any other budget. No anything. And this is...
So listen to this one more time.
The problem. People have to have a realistic look at how we're going to survive as a nation. We keep on cutting it.
Cutting. He gives it away, and then he catches himself. I mean, tweaking. We need to tweak Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He means cut. He means cut. And so this is the reason why so many people, I mean, there's so many other reasons as well. I mean, Trump has been wildly inconsistent on this. He used to say that we would have to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He saw how politically damaging it was, so he tried to walk it back. Republican elected officials in both chambers have also said this. People are right to distrust Republicans on their commitments to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And when Marjorie Taylor Greene reacts the way that she does, it also fuels distrust. Again, appropriately so. MAGA Republican politicians are uniquely, peerlessly dishonest. And so I would argue you should probably be somewhat skeptical anytime you engage with a politician, but your spidey sense should be tingling at all times when you hear a MAGA Republican open their mouths, especially react as viscerally as Marjorie Taylor Greene does. I mean, the math just doesn't math. Elon Musk either lied to your face when he said he could cut $2 trillion from the federal budget, or he knew what he was talking about, but he meant he was going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, in which case, when they tell you they're not going to do that, they're lying, right? Or he lied to you about the amount that could be cut, right? He either doesn't know what he's talking about, he did know what he was talking about, it just means that he's going to do something that nobody wants done, in which case they lied to you when they said they wouldn't do that, or he lied to you about the amount he could successfully cut. And I think that's part of the reason that Marjorie Taylor Greene was so viscerally frustrated and prompted her to snap the way she did, because if you examine Doge or the Republicans' commitments to Social Security and you scratch just a little bit, the whole thing tends to fall apart. And that puts them on the defensive, and that gets them very upset. So Trump hasn't even been inaugurated yet. This next Congress has not been seated yet. It remains to be seen what will happen, but those are the three options. Musk doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He lied about the amount that he could cut, or he was 100% accurate, in which case they are going to cut massively Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Those are the only options. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, as dumb as she is, knows that, and she is desperate to get away from any sort of scrutiny about those social safety nets. And it leads her to lash out the way that she did. Interesting stuff. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.